What if I told you that divorcing your pregnant wife could destroy everything you've ever built? Luca Arden thought he had it all calculated. He was trading in his elegant gallery owner wife, Seraphina, for the dazzling youth of supermodel Kira Monroe, ready to upgrade his life like he was flipping a property. But here's what Luca didn't know. His quietly refined wife wasn't just another beautiful face he'd charmed at an art opening. She was hiding a secret so massive it would make his $200 million real estate empire look like a street corner hustle. You see, Seraphina Hale wasn't the nobody he thought he married. She was the missing heiress to an $18 billion steel dynasty. And when those divorce papers landed on her gallery desk, they didn't just end a marriage. They awakened a force that controlled the very foundation his empire was built on. This is the story of what happens when a mafia boss picks the wrong woman to underestimate. It's about hidden fortunes, industrial warfare, and the most devastating power play you'll ever witness. By the end of this tale, Luca Arden will discover that some women don't just walk away, they dismantle everything in ways that will leave you breathless. So buckle up, because you're about to witness what happens when you break your vow to God and betray the one woman who could destroy you. The champagne flute shattered against the gallery floor as Seraphina Hale stared at the documents in her trembling hands. The sound echoed through the high-ceiling space like a warning shot. Crystal shards scattering across the polished concrete like diamonds. Dark liquid pooled beneath her feet, seeping into the grout lines like spilled promises. "Divorce papers," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the soft jazz playing through the gallery speakers. Luca Arden stood framed in the doorway of her private office, adjusting his Patek Philippe watch with the same cold precision he used to close million-dollar deals. At 38, he still possessed the dangerous magnetism and calculating dark eyes that had first captivated her 6 years ago. The intricate tattoos crawling up his neck, a remnant of a past he claimed to have left behind. But now those features seemed carved from stone, hardened by ambition and something darker. "I meant to discuss this with you privately," he said, his tone suggesting he was closing a business transaction rather than ending their marriage. "My legal team advised serving you formally. Cleaner that way, no confusion." Seraphina's free hand instinctively moved to her rounded belly, 8 months swollen with the son they'd chosen to name together just weeks ago. She felt exposed in her simple cashmere dress, while he stood there in his three-piece Tom Ford suit, dressed for another day of conquest in the towers he'd built. "Your legal team," she repeated slowly, each word weighted with disbelief. "Not our lawyers, yours. Well, obviously, we'll need separate representation now." Luca stepped carefully around the broken glass, his Berluti shoes avoiding the spreading champagne like it was contaminated. "I've already had Jerome Mitchell draft the settlement terms. You'll be taken care of. Naturally. The postnup ensures that." The casual cruelty of his words struck her like a physical blow. 6 years of marriage, 6 years of believing she'd finally found someone who wanted her for herself and not for the industrial empire she'd walked away from. And he was discussing her future like a line item in a contract. "When?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "When what? When did you decide? When did you decide we were disposable?" Luca paused at her desk, running his tattooed fingers along the surface where they'd once shared late-night wine and dreams. "Seraphina, let's be real. We've both known this wasn't working for months. We want different things. You want some quiet life hiding in this gallery, playing small. I need someone who matches my ambition, who understands the game. Someone like Kira." The name hung in the air between them like an indictment. Seraphina's jaw tightened. "Kira Monroe, the model from your charity gala last month. I don't know what you're implying. The hotel charges on the corporate card, the late-night property inspections in Manhattan, the way you've been sleeping in the guest room for 3 months. Her voice remained steady despite the rage building in her chest. "I'm pregnant, Luca, not blind." He had the grace to look uncomfortable, at least for a moment. "Kira gets it. She understands what it takes to build something real in this city. The networking, the image, the sacrifice. She doesn't want me to be someone I'm not." "And I do?" Seraphina's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You wanted me to be your perfect trophy wife. Someone cultured enough to impress your investors, but simple enough not to challenge you. That's not love, Luca. That's casting. I needed a partner who could match where I'm going, not where I've been. His words were surgical, designed to wound. You're a good woman, Seraphina, but you're comfortable being small. That's not who I am. That's not who I'm going to be. Seraphina stared at the man she'd married, searching for any trace of the person who'd once promised her the world and sworn before God to protect her and their children. He was still there somewhere beneath the expensive clothes and the hardened ambition. But he felt like a stranger now. What about our son? We'll work out custody, 50-50 split, supervise visits while you're recovering from the birth. He spoke as if their unborn child was another asset to be divided, like their cars or the vacation home in the Hamptons. Jerome says it's all very standard, clean. Seraphina felt something shift inside her, something cold and final, settling into place like a lock clicking shut. A growing certainty that this conversation would be a turning point in ways Luca couldn't possibly imagine. He thought he was discarding a liability. He'd just declared war on a dynasty that had been moving steel and breaking men for 4 generations. She looked down at the divorce papers, then back at the man who thought he'd already won. You're right about one thing, Luca, she said quietly, her hand resting protectively on her belly. This conversation will be very clean. She just didn't tell him who'd be left standing when it was over. Seraphina's hands trembled as she scrolled through her contacts, passing names she hadn't thought about in 6 years. The gallery felt suffocating now, every corner holding memories of a life she'd built on a foundation of lies. Her own lies, her deliberate invisibility. She stopped at a name she'd kept buried, Deacon Jones. The phone rang twice before his familiar baritone filled her ear. Miss Hale, I was wondering when you'd call. The use of her maiden name after all these years hit her like coming home. Deacon, I know what you need. His voice carried the weight of 4 decades serving her family. I saw the filing this morning. Arden versus Arden. Your husband's attorneys are quite efficient. Seraphina sank into her office chair, the leather creaking under her weight. He doesn't know, does he? About who I really am? No one knows, child. You made sure of that when you walked away. There was no judgment in his tone, only facts. But now you're ready to come back. I don't have a choice anymore. Not with the baby coming. Not with, her voice cracked, not with him treating you like you're disposable. Deacon finished, his tone sharpening. Men like Luca Arden believe power is measured in millions in muscle. They don't understand that real power is infrastructure, foundation, steel. Tell me what we have on him. The pause on the other end felt deliberate, calculated. When Deacon spoke again, there was something almost dangerous in his voice. Everything. Hale Industrial Supply has quietly been the primary materials provider for Arden real estate development for the past 4 years. The concrete, the steel beams, the rebar, every legitimate building he's erected is standing on Hale foundation. Seraphina's breath caught. How was that possible? Your grandmother anticipated you might need leverage someday. When Arden started going legitimate, she positioned us as his primary supplier through shell companies. He has no idea the woman he's divorcing controls the entire supply chain, keeping his empire vertical. Deacon's satisfaction was audible. We also hold significant shares in the banks financing his construction loans. Not controlling shares, but enough to cause serious problems if we called in favors. How much damage could we do? We could shut down every active construction site he has within 72 hours. His $300 million downtown project? Dead. His commercial developments in Brooklyn? Frozen. His reputation as the man who delivers on time? Destroyed. Deacon paused. But you need to be certain, Seraphina. Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back to being invisible. Seraphina looked down at her belly, feeling her son move beneath her palm. Luca had made his choice. He'd chosen a woman who saw him as a bank account over the woman carrying his child. He'd chosen his image over his vows. Do you think Luca deserves what's coming? Comment, vows matter, if you believe marriage means something more than a business transaction. I'm certain, Deacon, she said quietly. Let's show him what real power looks like. Welcome home, Miss Hale. Kira Monroe's laughter echoed across the rooftop terrace of Luca's penthouse, champagne bubbling in her crystal flute as Manhattan glittered beneath them like scattered diamonds. She leaned into him, her crimson dress clinging to curves that had graced magazine covers from Milan to Tokyo, her red hair catching the city lights like fire. "To new beginnings," she purred, touching her glass to his. The photographers Luca had personally invited captured every angle, every intimate whisper. Page 6 would eat this up by morning. Luca's arm tightened around her waist possessively. "You look perfect tonight. This is what power looks like, Kira. Not hiding in some dusty gallery pretending to be modest." "God, I still can't believe she thought she could hold on to you." Kira scrolled through her phone, already checking the social media posts tagging them together. 8 months pregnant and serving her divorce papers? You're ruthless. I love it. Business is business. Luca's tattooed fingers traced her shoulder. "Jerome says the post-nup is airtight. She signed away any claim to my assets before we even married. Smart move on my part." Kira's eyes gleamed with calculation hidden behind adoration. "So the penthouse, the cars, the property portfolio, it's all protected? Every brick, every deed, every dollar." Luca's confidence was absolute. Seraphina walks away with whatever's legally required for the kid and nothing more. She should have thought about her future before she got comfortable being nobody. "How much are we talking?" Kira asked, trying to sound casual. "I mean, just so I know what kind of life we're building together." Luca pulled her closer, his voice dropping to a possessive growl. 200 million in real estate holdings, 50 million liquid, another 100 in development projects breaking ground next quarter. Everything I've built in the past decade." He gestured at the skyline. "See that tower going up in Tribeca? Mine. The commercial complex in Brooklyn? Mine. I own this city's future, baby." Kira's smile widened. She'd done her research before pursuing Luca Arden. Former mafia enforcer turned legitimate real estate mogul. Dangerous enough to be exciting, rich enough to be worthwhile, and arrogant enough to be predictable. "Your ex-wife must be devastated," she said, playing her role perfectly. "She'll survive. Women like Seraphina always do. They find some middle-class guy who wants a quiet life, and they disappear into suburbia." Luca's dismissiveness was absolute. She was never built for this world anyway. What Luca didn't see was the email notification lighting up his phone, buried under celebration photos and congratulations messages. His project manager, trying to reach him about unexpected permit delays. His bank officer requesting an urgent meeting about credit lines. His supplier cryptically mentioning corporate restructuring. The war had already begun. He just didn't know he was bleeding yet. Hit subscribe if you believe treating people as disposable always comes back to haunt you. Only people like Luca think they're untouchable. The wrought iron gates of the Hale estate opened like the jaws of history itself, swallowing Seraphina's car into a world she'd spent 6 years trying to forget. The Georgian mansion rose from manicured grounds like a monument to American industrial power. Every brick and beam, forged from the fortune her great-grandfather had built one steel beam at a time. Mama May stood on the columned portico, 83 years old and still commanding as a general. Her silver hair was pulled back in the same severe bun she'd worn for decades. Her dark eyes missing nothing as Seraphina emerged from the car, one hand protectively cradling her swollen belly. "Look at you," Mama May said, her voice carrying across the driveway. "Finally ready to stop playing poor." Seraphina climbed the steps slowly, feeling the weight of her pregnancy and her decision. "Mama. Don't mama me like you're still that scared girl who ran away from responsibility." But May's arms opened anyway, pulling Seraphina into an embrace that smelled of Chanel No. 5 and old money. "Come inside, we have work to do." The study was exactly as Seraphina remembered. Floor-to-ceiling mahogany shelves lined with leather-bound ledgers documenting 4 generations of Hale dominance. May settled into the chair behind the massive desk, the same desk where Seraphina's great-grandfather had signed contracts that built half of America's railroads. "Deacon tells me your husband made a mistake," May said, pouring bourbon into 2 crystal glasses. "Men always do when they think with their pride instead of their sense. He doesn't know what I am, what we are. Oh, child, he's about to get a very expensive education." May opened a leather portfolio spreading documents across the desk. Hale Industrial Steel, established 1889. Current valuation, $18 billion. We supply 70% of the construction steel for commercial developments on the eastern seaboard. Every skyscraper, every bridge, every tunnel. Our metal holds it up. Seraphina leaned forward, scanning the corporate structure charts and subsidiary holdings. This is power, May finished. Real power. Not the kind your husband plays with, throwing money around and making threats. The kind of power that decides whether buildings get built at all. She pulled out another file, this one marked Arden Real Estate Development. 4 years ago, when Luca started going legitimate, we positioned 3 of our shell companies as his primary suppliers. Apex Materials, Cornerstone Industrial, Foundation Supply, all Hale subsidiaries. He's been buying from us. Every pound of steel, every cubic yard of concrete, every shipment of rebar. May's smile was cold satisfaction. His entire legitimate empire is literally built on our foundation. We've also acquired strategic positions in his financing banks. Not enough to control them, but enough to whisper in the right ears. Seraphina stared at the documentation, her mind calculating the implications. You knew I might need this someday. I knew that any man who'd make you hide who you are wasn't worth keeping. I was just waiting for you to figure it out. May pushed the files toward her granddaughter. The question is, are you ready to stop hiding and start ruling? Seraphina's hand moved to her belly, feeling her son kick as if in answer. Luca had chosen his path. Now she'd choose hers. Luca's phone buzzed for the 14th time in an hour, each notification another crack in the empire he'd built. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, watching the Tribeca construction site that had gone eerily silent 3 days ago. Cranes stood motionless against the sky like frozen sentinels. No workers, no materials, no movement. Talk to me, Jerome. He didn't turn around as his attorney entered. Jerome Mitchell's usual composure had fractured into something close to panic. The permit for the Tribeca Tower was revoked this morning. The city inspector cited irregularities in material certifications that have never been an issue before. Your appeal was denied within an hour. That never happens. Fix it. I can't fix what I don't understand. It gets worse. Jerome dropped a folder on Luca's desk. Chase called your construction loan this morning. Said your credit profile has materially changed. Your other banks are reviewing your lines. Simultaneously, Luca spun around. That's impossible. My credit is perfect. It was perfect yesterday. Today, it's like someone flipped a switch. Jerome's hands shook as he pulled out more documents. Your suppliers, all 3 of your primary materials companies, just sent force majeure notices. They're canceling contracts, every single one. Apex Materials, Cornerstone Industrial, Foundation Supply. All at once. The pattern crystallized in Luca's mind like ice forming. This wasn't coincidence. This was orchestration. Who owns those companies? That's what I've been trying to figure out. They're all subsidiaries of subsidiaries. Shell companies registered in Delaware, owned by holding companies in... Jerome stopped, his face going pale. Luca, they all trace back to the same parent company. Who? Hale Industrial Steel. The name hit Luca like a physical blow. Hale, as in one of the oldest industrial dynasties in America. $18 billion. They supply most of the eastern seaboard's construction materials. Jerome's voice dropped him. Luca, they own your supply chain. They've owned it for years, and you never knew. Luca's mind raced, connecting dots he'd been too arrogant to see. The companies that kept his legitimate empire running weren't independent contractors. They were arms of a machine, powerful enough to build or destroy at will. Why would Hale Steel target me? Jerome pulled out his tablet, fingers trembling, as he pulled up a genealogy report. I had my research team dig into the Hale family structure. They're intensely private. The current heir disappeared from public records 6 years ago. He turned the screen toward Luca. The photograph showed a young woman at a charity gala, elegant in an emerald gown. Identified in the caption as Seraphina Hale, heiress to Hale industrial steel fortune. Luca's blood turned to ice. Same face, same eyes. His wife. If you think Luca's getting it exactly what he deserves, hit that like button. Only arrogant fools think they can betray someone without consequences. His ex-wife wasn't nobody. She was the woman who could erase everything he'd built with a single phone call. And he'd just served her divorce papers. Kira Monroe sat in her penthouse suite, Luca's penthouse suite, technically, scrolling through financial reports with the same intensity she'd once studied casting calls. The numbers on her screen told a story that made her stomach drop and her survival instincts kick into overdrive. Hale Industrial Steel, $18.7 billion valuation. Arden Real Estate Development, $200 million net worth. She'd bet on the wrong horse, spectacularly. Her phone buzzed with another text from Luca. Don't believe anything you read. Media lies, I'm handling it. 3 days of construction sites frozen, permits revoked, and banks circling like sharks. He wasn't handling anything. He was drowning. Kira pulled up another tab, images of Seraphina Hale at industry galas from 7 years ago, commanding rooms full of power brokers, her family's name on buildings from Boston to Atlanta. The quiet gallery owner had been playing poor while sitting on an empire that made Luca look like a corner hustler. She'd made a career out of reading rooms and knowing when to pivot. This was that moment. Kira dialed the number Deacon Jones had quietly provided through a mutual contact, an olive branch extended to the smart players. Seraphina answered on the second ring. Miss Monroe, I wondered how long it would take you. Kira's throat tightened, but her voice remained smooth. Mrs. Arden, or should I say Miss Hale, I think we should talk about how you're sleeping in my bed with my soon-to-be ex-husband. Seraphina's tone carried no anger, only cold amusement. I'm listening. About how I made a business decision based on incomplete information. Kira stood, pacing her borrowed luxury. Luca presented himself as the prize. I didn't do my homework on you. That's on me. You slept with a married man whose wife was 8 months pregnant. What's your pitch, Kira? Why shouldn't I bury you along with him? Because I'm good at what I do, image management, public relations, making powerful people look better than they are. Kira's voice steadied. And because I'm smart enough to know when I'm on the losing side, Luca's empire is built on your foundation. Without you, he's nothing. I chose wrong. The silence on the other end stretched like a blade. You're very pragmatic, Seraphina finally said. Disloyal but pragmatic. In my world, loyalty is a luxury. Survival isn't. Kira took a breath. I have information. Details about Luca's operations that aren't exactly legitimate. The connections he thinks he's buried. The money he's moving that doesn't match his tax returns. I can help you destroy him completely. What do you want in return? A job. A legitimate one. Whatever you're building, I want to be part of the winning team. Kira's voice hardened. And I want Luca to know exactly who gave you the ammunition. Seraphina's laugh was soft and dangerous. The Hale Foundation is expanding its public outreach division, 6-figure salary, stock options, and your name on legitimate campaigns that actually matter. But Kira, if you ever betray me the way you betrayed him, there won't be anywhere on this earth you can hide. Understood. Good. My attorney will send contracts. And Kira, pack your things. You're moving out tonight. The line went dead. Kira stared at her phone, then at the penthouse that had never really been hers. She'd switched sides. Now it was time to watch Luca burn. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Hale building sat in silence as Luca Arden stepped through the door, Jerome Mitchell trailing behind like a condemned man. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Manhattan's skyline, but all Luca could focus on was the woman seated at the head of the table. Seraphina wore emerald green, the same shade as her dress in their wedding photos. The silk draped elegantly over her 9-month belly. Her blonde hair was pulled back severely, revealing the sharp cheekbones and commanding presence he'd somehow never truly seen before. She looked like what she was, old money, old power, and ancient ruthlessness. Then he saw Kira, sitting 3 seats down from Seraphina, dressed in navy instead of her usual red, avoiding his eyes completely. What the hell is she doing here? Luca's voice echoed off marble and glass. Miss Monroe is part of my team now, Seraphina said calmly, sliding a folder across the polished table. Please sit. We have much to discuss. Luca remained standing, his tattooed hands clenching into fists. You think you can destroy me? I built this empire from nothing. I've survived worse than some spoiled heiress playing corporate games. Sit down, Mr. Arden. Deacon Jones spoke from beside Seraphina, his voice carrying decades of authority. Or leave, and federal prosecutors will receive these documents within the hour. Jerome grabbed Luca's arm, forcing him into the chair. Listen to what they have to say. Seraphina opened the folder, her movements precise and unhurried. Apex Materials, Cornerstone Industrial, Foundation Supply, all Hale subsidiaries. You've been building your empire on my family's foundation for 4 years. Every legitimate property you own stands on our steel, our concrete, our infrastructure. So what? I paid for everything fair and square. You did, but contracts can be terminated. Permits can be revoked. Credit can be frozen. Seraphina's eyes locked onto his. Your $300 million in active developments? Dead without our materials. Your bank loans? Called. Your reputation as the developer who delivers on time? Destroyed. I can erase your legitimate empire in 72 hours. Luca leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. You're bluffing. Seraphina slid another document across the table. Financial records, transaction logs, photographs. But here's what interests the FBI, Luca. Your construction company has been laundering money for the Moretti family. Shell corporations, inflated invoices, cash moving through renovation projects that barely exist. You told me you went straight. You lied. The color drained from Luca's face. Kira provided the details. Account numbers, meeting locations, names. Seraphina's voice remained steady. She's been quite helpful in documenting your continued criminal activities. Luca's head snapped toward Kira, betrayal and rage contorting his features. You treacherous. I chose the winning side, Kira said simply, meeting his eyes for the first time. Something you should have considered before serving divorce papers to a billionaire. What would you do in Seraphina's position? Comment justice if you believe Luca deserves everything coming to him. Seraphina pushed a pen across the table. Sign the separation agreement. Transfer 70% of your legitimate assets to me. Full custody of our son with supervised visitation for you. In return, these documents stay sealed and you keep your freedom. Luca stared at the papers, his empire crumbling around him like the buildings he'd never finish. Sign it, Luca, Jerome whispered. Or go to prison. Seraphina's hand moved to her belly, her face tightening almost imperceptibly. The contraction rolled through her like a wave, stealing her breath 4 or 5 seconds before releasing its grip. She glanced at her watch. 7 minutes since the last one. Mrs. Arden? Deacon leaned forward, concern breaking through his professional mask. Are you? I'm fine. She forced her voice steady, turning back to Luca. But I suggest you make your decision quickly. My son seems eager to meet the world. Luca's eyes widened as understanding hit him. You're in labor? Right now? Contractions started an hour ago. Another one gripped her, harder this time, and she couldn't quite hide the wince. Which means you have approximately, she breathed through the pain, 20 minutes to sign those papers before I leave for the hospital. After that, these documents go to the FBI, and you can explain your money laundering from a federal holding cell. This is insane. Luca looked around the room wildly, searching for any ally, any escape. Jerome wouldn't meet his eyes. Kira examined her manicure with studied indifference. Deacon simply waited, pen in hand, patience carved from stone. You have a choice, Luca. Seraphina's voice cut through his panic. Sign and retain some dignity, some freedom, some small role in your son's life. Or refuse and lose everything, your empire, your freedom, and any chance of ever holding your child. You'd really do this? Keep my son from me? You served me divorce papers while I was 8 months pregnant. Seraphina's composure finally cracked, fury bleeding through. You called me disposable. You replaced me with a woman who sees you as a bank account. You broke vows you made before God. Another contraction hit and she gripped the table edge. I'm giving you more mercy than you ever showed me. Luca stared at the separation agreement. Every clause a dagger. 70% of his legitimate assets. Full custody to Seraphina. Supervised visits. His real estate empire, everything he'd built, transferred to the woman he'd tried to discard. His hand shook as he reached for the pen. Smart choice, Kira murmured from across the table. Luca signed his name on 7 separate pages, each signature feeling like a piece of his soul being ripped away. When he finished, Deacon collected the documents with efficient satisfaction, sliding them into a leather portfolio. Seraphina stood slowly, one hand supporting her belly. The other braced against the table. Her water broke, liquid spreading across the marble floor like a final judgment. Deacon, call the car. Her voice remained commanding even through the pain. Jerome, those documents are binding. Any attempt to contest them will trigger the release of the FBI files. She looked at Luca one last time. This man she'd loved enough to hide her identity for. This man who'd thrown her away like garbage. You gambled everything on the wrong woman, Luca. I hope she was worth it. She walked toward the door, Deacon supporting her arm, leaving Luca sitting in the ruins of his empire. Subscribe if you believe breaking your vows comes with a price. Only people like Luca think they can betray without consequences. The elevator doors closed on Seraphina's triumphant, pain-racked face. Behind her, in that conference room, Luca Arden finally understood what it meant to be disposable. Hale Arden came into the world at 3:47 a.m., screaming his arrival with lungs that promised he'd inherited his mother's steel spine. Seraphina held him against her chest, tears streaming down her face as Mama May stood beside the hospital bed, one weathered hand resting on her granddaughter's shoulder. He has your eyes, May whispered, and your great-grandfather's stubbornness, I suspect. He'll need it. Seraphina kissed her son's forehead, breathing in that new baby smell mixed with destiny and legacy. The world doesn't give anything to those who aren't strong enough to take it. Deacon entered quietly, holding documents that couldn't wait even for birth. The transfers are complete. Arden's legitimate assets are now under Hale Foundation management. His signature is legally binding. He smiled down at the baby. Your son is one of the wealthiest children in America, Mrs. Hale, and you control it all. 6 months later, Seraphina stood in the Hale Building's executive suite, Trey sleeping peacefully in a designer bassinet near her desk while she reviewed quarterly reports. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed a Manhattan that now recognized her power. Forbes had run her profile last month. The heiress who came home. How Seraphina Hale rebuilt an empire. Her phone buzzed, security announcing Luca's arrival for his supervised visit. He looked smaller somehow when he entered, the swagger gone, replaced by something cautious and diminished. His tattoos seemed faded under the fluorescent lights. 6 months of watching his empire operate under someone else's control had humbled the man who once thought himself untouchable. Seraphina. He nodded, formal now, all the casual arrogance burned away. Luca, she gestured to Trey. He's just woken up. You have an hour. Luca approached the bassinet like a man approaching salvation he didn't deserve. When he lifted Trey into his arms, something cracked in his expression. Regret, loss, the devastating awareness of everything he'd gambled and lost. He looks like you, Luca said quietly. He looks like a Hale. Seraphina's correction was gentle but absolute. He'll grow up knowing his legacy, knowing what real power looks like, knowing that loyalty and honor matter more than image and ambition. Luca held his son, unable to argue because the truth was undeniable. He'd chosen wrong. He'd underestimated the quiet woman in the gallery, and it had cost him everything that mattered. I'm sorry, he whispered. Though whether to Seraphina or to Trey, even he didn't know. Seraphina watched him with eyes that had moved beyond anger into something colder and more final. She'd built her life on hiding, on being small, on believing love meant erasing yourself. Luca had taught her the most valuable lesson. Never make yourself disposable for someone who sees you as replaceable. The Hale Foundation now controlled $2.3 billion in purified assets, funding infrastructure projects and educational initiatives that would reshape cities. Deacon had become her chief operating officer, their partnership built on mutual respect and the kind of loyalty Luca would never understand. Kira ran their public relations division with ruthless efficiency, her past a cautionary tale she shared freely. "I chose ambition over integrity once, never again." And Luca? He kept his criminal network, the dark underbelly he'd never really left. But his legitimate empire, the part that mattered in boardrooms and society pages, belonged to the woman he'd served divorce papers to. "Your hour is starting," Seraphina said, returning to her desk, to her reports, to the empire that had always been hers. Luca sat with his son, counting minutes he'd never get back, learning the price of breaking vows to a woman made of unbreakable steel. The end. If this story taught you that everyone deserves respect, especially pregnant wives, drop a comment saying loyalty matters. Only people who side with betrayers like Luca will stay silent.